In this discussion, we'll explore Paul's prayer in Colossians 1:9-14, from the perspective of ancient Hebrew thought and the worldview that influenced Paul. And the goal is to understand the prayer as it would connect with a first-century Jewish audience familiar with the Hebrew Scriptures and their covenantal relationship with God and Gentiles grafted into the covenant.
Paul, a Jewish rabbi trained under Gamaliel, writes to the Colossians, a diverse community of Jewish and Gentile believers, emphasizing their life in Christ. Ancient Hebrew thought centers on Yahweh's covenant with Israel, the Torah as a guide for life, and a holistic view of human existence, where knowledge, action, and the relationship with Yahweh are interconnected.
In verse 9, Paul prays that the Colossians be filled with the knowledge of Yahweh's will in all spiritual wisdom and understanding. That, in Hebrew thought, means knowledge, which is not merely intellectual, but experiential and relational. To know Yahweh's will is to align with his purposes, as revealed in the Torah, the prophets, and now through the Messiah. This echoes Deuteronomy 4:6, where keeping Yahweh's commandments demonstrates wisdom and understanding to the nations. The will of Yahweh reflects his covenantal desires for his people, righteousness, justice, and faithfulness, as in Micah 6:8.
The phrase spiritual wisdom and understanding relates to the ideas of ḥokmah, meaning wisdom, and binah, meaning understanding. In Proverbs 1:7, wisdom starts with the fear of the Lord, which is a respectful trust in God's character and commands. For Paul, this wisdom is spiritual because it comes from the Ruach, or the breath of Yahweh, who reveals Yeshua, the Messiah, as the fulfillment of his plan in 1 Corinthians 2:10-13.
In verse 10, Paul reminds us that the purpose of this knowledge is to walk in a manner worthy of the Lord, fully pleasing to him. Halak, meaning walk, is a metaphor for lifestyle and conduct rooted in covenant obedience as seen in Genesis 17:1 and Psalm 119:1. To walk worthy means living in alignment with Yahweh's character and calling, just as Israel was called to be a light to the nations. In Isaiah 42:6, for Paul, this now applies to followers of the Way, who are to reflect Yahweh's glory through their lives.
Fully pleasing to him highlights a life focused on Yahweh's pleasure, reflecting the concept of living to honor God, as seen in Psalm 19:14. This is not about earning favor, but about responding to God's grace within the covenant, now extended to Gentiles through the Messiah.
The phrase bearing fruit in every good work reflects the emphasis on righteousness, yielding tangible results. In Genesis 1:28, Yahweh's command to be fruitful relates to the goal of creation, and in Isaiah 5:1-7, Israel's fruit is justice and righteousness. Paul expands this to followers, whose good works are acts of love, justice, and mercy that show Yahweh's kingdom, as seen in Micah 6:8 and Matthew 5:16.
Paul prays for increasing in the knowledge of God. Knowing God is dynamic and relational, growing through obedience and experience, as in Hosea 6:3. This is not speculative knowledge, as in Greek philosophy, but a deepening relationship with the God who reveals himself through his actions, creation, Exodus, and now Yeshua, our Messiah. For Paul, this growth happens as followers live out their faith, witnessing Yahweh's faithfulness in their obedience and community.
In verse 11, being strengthened with all power according to his glorious might, so that you may have great endurance and patience. Paul is invoking God's historical acts of deliverance and creation, asking that the Colossians experience this divine strength to remain faithful as a community, mirroring Israel's perseverance through exile or oppression.
Yahweh's Gevurah, often described as power or might, is his active sovereign ability to deliver and sustain his people, as seen in the Exodus. According to Exodus 15:2, the Lord is my strength. Paul prays that the Colossians be strengthened by God's Gevurah, the same covenantal power that rescued Israel and sustains creation. This strength enables endurance and patience, qualities connected to Israel's trust in God during trials, as seen in Psalm 27:14, wait for the Lord. Be strong and take heart.
In verse 12, and giving joyful thanks to the Father, who has qualified you to share in the inheritance of his holy people in the kingdom of light, Paul presents the Colossians' inclusion as a fulfillment of God's promise to Abraham that all nations would be blessed in Genesis 12:3. Their gratitude is expressed through communal worship, acknowledging God's gracious act of making them part of his covenant people.
Hesed, translated as gratitude, is a response to God's covenant faithfulness, often expressed in worship, as in Psalm 104, enter his gates with thanksgiving. Paul's choice of Father reflects Yahweh, who chooses and sustains his people as our Father, just as Yeshua did. The use of inheritance echoes Israel's promised land in Deuteronomy 4:21, a tangible gift of Yahweh's covenant, now expanded to include Gentiles as part of Yahweh's qadosh, his holy people in Exodus 19:6. The phrase kingdom of light aligns with Hebrew imagery of God's presence as light, as in Psalm 27:1, the Lord is my light, symbolizing holiness and divine rule, rather than a dualistic contrast to darkness as found in Greek thought.
In verse 13, for he has rescued us from the dominion of darkness and brought us into the kingdom of the Son he loves. Paul views the Colossians' salvation as a new exodus, where God delivers them from spiritual oppression into a covenant relationship with the Messiah, fulfilling Israel's hope for universal restoration.
Natsal, translated as rescue, recalls Yahweh's deliverance of Israel from Egypt, as stated in Exodus 6:6, a foundational event in Hebrew history. The phrase, dominion of darkness, evokes the chaos and oppression of slavery or exile, where Yahweh's enemies hold sway, for example, Isaiah 9:2, the people walking in darkness. In Hebrew thought, darkness represents life apart from God's covenant, not a metaphysical evil as in Greek dualism. The phrase, kingdom of the Son he loves, reflects the Messianic hope rooted in the Davidic covenant in 2 Samuel 7:12-16, where the Messiah establishes Yahweh's reign. Paul presents Jesus as the promised king who brings followers into Yahweh's covenantal kingdom.
In verse 14, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins, Paul describes Yeshua's work as the ultimate act of covenant renewal, where forgiveness restores the community, allowing them to live as Yahweh's holy people.
Geula, translated as redemption, refers to Yahweh's act of freeing his people, often through a kinsman redeemer, as in Ruth 4:4, or his power, as in Isaiah 44:22. Forgiveness of sins is central to the covenant, as illustrated on the Day of Atonement in Leviticus 16, where Yahweh restores Israel through sacrifice. Paul connects redemption to Yeshua, the Messiah, whose death fulfills the sacrificial system, securing forgiveness and renewing the covenant for all people.
In summary, Paul's prayer, viewed through the lens of ancient Hebrew thought, is a powerful invocation of God's covenantal power and faithfulness. He prays for the Colossians to be strengthened by Yahweh's might, as Israel was, to endure trials as a faithful community. Their gratitude reflects worship for Yahweh's gracious inclusion in his covenant, making them heirs of his promises. The rescue from darkness and entry into the Messiah's kingdom echoes the Exodus and Messianic hope, while redemption through forgiveness fulfills the covenant's sacrificial restoration. This prayer is not abstract or individualistic, but a communal call to live as Yahweh's holy people, rooted in the concrete, historical, and relational framework of teachings revealed to Moses.
If you listeners have areas of interest you'd like to explore further, questions or comments, please don't hesitate to let us know.